aspirational goal is to be complete by 5 o'clock. Let the record also note that the PD furnished cookies this evening.
Yeah, public. I just went into Overton's office and took them, actually. Just like a mission.
With that, we'll start the presentation.
Deal.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Gaylord, Fire Chief. Appreciate the opportunity to be back here in front of this group. Last week, words to the effect of, that was a lot, that was, drinking from a fire hose is somewhat appropriate. Last week, it was a deuce and a half. We'll try to get it down to maybe an inch and a half hose today, and certainly meet the aspirational timeline. It was a lot. It really was. And our team looked at that. It guided our thinking on how to present information. So hopefully you'll have benefited from our thinking through that a little bit. So last week, big takeaways. There's really two different things that are going on in the community that have gone on, kind of running away from our resource level. We talked about it in the context of the wildland risk and the mid-rise fire risk. The mid-rise fire risk for us is, we refer to our customer as Mrs. Smith. She's a metaphorical person. It could be a man or a woman. It could be any ethnicity. But Mrs. Smith, if she's having chest pains, it's a decidedly different call if she lives here than if she lives there, even an EMS call. And so for us, that mid-rise, doubling of mid-rises is significant. And we just want to point that out. And then we talked to you about the other thing is what's changed, just unbelievable increases in frequency of calls for service for us. And that takes a toll on our availability for other emergencies. It takes a toll on the people, the men and women who do that work. So we had a really good visit. I think a lot of that contributed to the idea of it was like drinking from a fire hose. A lot to go through. We didn't get a chance to finish through all of the things that we do. Today, our team's going to come in and they're going to just kind of wrap that up. And then we hope to get into a little bit of information that drives what we think is the reason for the gap. And then in resourcing, and then just jump into the gap itself with some big summary things that are probably going to be parts of what gets discussed by you all at a later date. So we'll start with Chief Kyle Denham. Fire prevention.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. So what I'm going to focus on is fire prevention today. So community risk is basically the 5 E's that the chief mentioned last week. And a big part of that is fire prevention. A big part of that too is the wildfire management. I just wanted to let you all know that on the 4th of February, we're going to be talking about wildfire management, just because we could spend all day talking about that. So today we're just going to focus on this aspect of it. And essentially fire prevention, it's not what you're going to see in the newspapers, on social media. It's not that glamorous, but it's important. Basically, the reason you don't see that on the headlines is because it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's preventing injury, life loss, property damage, all those types of things. So kind of what we're going to go through is what we do and why we do it. So, what fire prevention does is they focus a lot on construction, new construction, remodels. And what that looks like is going through plans, making sure that, everything is revolved around property and life safety. But do firefighters have the appropriate water supply? Do we have the appropriate access to get our fire engines into these businesses? And, quite honestly, that's pretty time consuming. And takes a lot of effort. What we also do is occupancy inspections. And what that looks like is we have over 3,500 businesses in town, and they're broken into categories: high risk, medium risk, low risk. And with that, there's certain high risk are supposed to be inspected every year, medium risk every 2 years, and low risk every 3 years. So that's one of the other things that we do with our fire prevention team. Our on-duty crews do that stuff too when they have the opportunity to be in those businesses. But it's more of a reactive than proactive approach right now because they're not always in those businesses. They're not scheduling those inspections. Our fire prevention team is who's doing that. We get a lot of special events in town. And what fire prevention does with that is they do the inspections and the permitting. They're part of that process for things like Hullabaloo, the Pride Festival, 4th of July, fun runs, the market, the farmers market. So all those things require permitting, inspections. And we've had, Chris, it was over how many this year?
About 150.
About 150 of those so far this year. And then education. So, when fire prevention's out in the community, when they're in these businesses, they're educating, they're enforcing the code and explaining why we enforce the code the way we do. Our line personnel are also doing that when they have the opportunities, not only in businesses, but for public education presentations for kids in schools, fire station tours, and all that. So why do we do it? Like I mentioned before, it reduces the number and severity of emergencies. The whole goal is life safety, property conservation for both community and firefighters. Protecting the environment, that's a big one too. Fires can contaminate the air, they contaminate the ground. If our fire foam gets into the water drains, or the storm drains, it has effects on the environment. If there's an industrial fire, with tires, that's going to impact the air quality, and wildland fires, and every fire can impact the environment in a different way. So one thing that I wanted to hit on before we move to the next slide is the impact on businesses when there's a fire. So I want to give you some stats. This is from the Small Business Association, but 40% of businesses never reopen after a severe fire. 25% close within a year, and 90% will close within 2 years. And reason for that is because, the major damage to the inventory, to the building itself, and the equipment that's in those businesses. Another factor is insurance coverage is often insufficient. And then long closures increase the risk of permanent shutdown. And then loss of data and systems and all that important information that these businesses have. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that's a pretty important fact and kind of shows the importance of why we do fire prevention in the community. Pre-planning, that's also a big one. So what pre-planning does is when the fire prevention team goes out into these businesses, they're looking for hazards. They're looking for, they're enforcing code to make sure that the community's safe. But if they see other things that they want to pass on to the line operations, that's helpful information for us as well. One example of that is, there's a lot of businesses in town where people actually sleep and they live. And when we show up to a fire, we're making our decisions based on the risk. We're going to risk a lot. That's kind of our motto. But we don't know. But that's the kind of information that you learn when you're pre-planning, when you get information from prevention, and then when we're actually out in those businesses, we have that opportunity. So let me go to the next slide. Whoops. Okay, so what's changed? So there's been a lot that's changed in fire prevention as far as new code adoption. We update that code every few years, or I think we're on the 2019 right now, fire code.
2018, went from the 24.
Okay, 2018. So fire code changes, we adopt new fire code. There's new suppression systems that are more technical, more advanced. But overall, you're still putting yourself in these businesses, you're inspecting, you're enforcing. Some of those other factors have changed. One of the things I want to focus on is what's changed in our community as far as fire prevention. So, we've mentioned this multiple times, but I want to mention it again. Flagstaff is growing significantly. One of those, like that building that you see there, those are all over town. And Chief Fennell is going to talk more about that later, but a lot of these are residential over commercial. You have all these residents over restaurants, over other businesses that have the potential to start the fire, which is then going to go up and cause, issues for the residents that live there. With these larger buildings, it takes more staff time to actually do the inspection. They're bigger suppression units. They take more manpower to inspect the entire building. So it takes more time to do what was one story before and is now 4 or 5 stories now. Another thing that is important to know is that pre-recession, our fire prevention division had 4 people in it. Once the recession hit, we dropped down to 2. And so we're still at 2. So I just want to make you understand, up until about 2016, 2018, our fire crews, so at the time, 2018 to 21 fire crews were helping doing these periodic inspections throughout the year, as well as our 4 inspectors. And now all that work's being done by 2 in fire prevention. The crews, as you've heard, they're getting outrun. They don't have the time to do these inspections. Unfortunately, public education has gone down too. I don't know if any of you remember the clown shows we used to do every October. We'd hit every single school. And it was an awesome program for the community. And we no longer do that. We no longer take that proactive approach to public education unless it's an opportunity when we're in the community at the grocery store or on a call. But we're still doing those public educations, but more of a request. If somebody asks to come to the station or asks us to come somewhere, which is unfortunate just because it's reactive, it's not proactive. The need for public education has increased in the community just with the growth and the people and the population, but we just, our capacity is decreased. Business inspections, we've kind of talked about that already. I can't remember if it was Chief Fennell or Chief Wilson last week had mentioned that in 2001, there was 316 2-story buildings in town, or 2-story or plus. And in 2025, there's 665. So again, those businesses take longer to inspect, more manpower, not only for fire prevention, but for operations, which Chief Fennell is going to talk about. And then high density, high risk buildings. We already talked about the residential over commercial, but these buildings are awesome. They're beautiful. They just pose a different risk to us, our community, and the risk is there, but the ability to inspect them is not. So the other thing I'd like to share is just the community presence as a whole. When we're out doing inspections as a crew, or we're out doing public education, we're out in the community, and I know it feels to us. I don't know how you all feel about it, but we're just not out there as much because we're working and we don't have the ability to take that time, and it's unfortunate. And we really enjoy doing all that, and we think it's important. And I'll say it again, fire prevention isn't the most glamorous, but it's one of the most important parts of the 5 E's that Chief Gaylor mentioned, because you're stopping the problem before it ever happens. And you're going to hear more about the gaps here from Chief Wilson, but we've identified the gap. I told you we went from 4 and 18 to 21 crews, depending on the year that we're doing inspections, to just 2 people. And right now we're spending most of our time, we have the fire marshal, Chris Jack. He spends most of his time on the construction, the planning. And then we have one inspector who's trying to get all these businesses done, but it's not in that goal of the national standards. So I appreciate you letting me share that with you. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, we're going to walk through a couple of things here. We're going to go kind of in a sequential order. I'm going to talk a little bit about support services. It's going to go back to our operations chief, and then I'm going to come back up and really start diving into some of our gaps. So we'll try not to lose you, try not to make it feel like you're in school again, John, but I can't help it. The information is the information, and we're going to do the best we can. High level. What we do in support services as the deputy chief over support services, we're over all admin finance, all policies, all processes, all financial, everything associated with the fire department. It's our responsibility to maintain it. Now, to qualify, there's accountants that work for finance that works at the city, but inevitably at the end of the day, I work for the chief who's responsible for us to maintain our budget, every detail within it. So part of ours oversight is managing the budget. We also have all facilities. We're a little different than some of the other divisions within the city. We're responsible for all of our facilities as well. 8 different facilities. So we have 7 fire stations and a training facility. We do not have to maintain admin because it's in City Hall right now, but all the rest are ours. And what that responsibility looks like is all repairs, maintenance, oversight, scheduling, making sure things are operational, making sure we're replacing things. You don't think about it much, but we live in them 24/7, 365. There are people living, actively responding, working. So things go out much quicker, get worn out much quicker, and all the things associated with it. We're over fleet. We've got 40+ pieces of equipment, from large apparatus down to normal pickup trucks that you see driving around or smaller SUVs. All of those, we work with our fleet here, but we're responsible for all of the maintenance and the oversight associated with those. Scheduling specifically, some of the large apparatus, we're responsible for speccing them all out. We're responsible for planning them because that goes back to finance on that side. And then also making sure that we test things. So our apparatus all need to be tested to meet the requirement for what we call NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection. We're responsible for all the equipment on all of those pieces of apparatus. Every single one of those has every kind of a piece of equipment that you can imagine. We're responsible to maintain them, ensure they're operational, replace them, make sure they're still adequately within their scope of service level, and make sure that we have everything to be able to restock should we need to. We're also over 30 different programs. This is a big one. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. And when I came into this position in 2016, I was a staff of 1, and I was responsible for all these things that you see. I replaced the former staff of 1 who was working out at our partner summit at the time. This is a huge load programmatically. Every single thing that is on the fire apparatus or in the facilities, somebody has to oversee. So we had all of our captains were required to have a program that they oversaw. So you might have a captain paramedic running 3,500 calls a year, responsible for all the reporting, and they're also responsible for all the personal protective equipment and the maintenance, the oversight, the replacement, the scheduling, everything that goes with it. You can see we were setting ourselves up for failure. So we'll talk a little bit more about it. Training. I'm going to go in a little bit more into training in a couple slides down the road, but we're responsible for our own academy. We put it on. We're a regional sponsor of the academy. So all the regional partners within the Northern Arizona come to our academy. We put it on. We do it at our facility. We oversee it, we facilitate it, and we schedule and we put everything through it. So it's a large component that we'll talk about. So a lot goes on in support services. One of the things that we think about are daily operational impacts. Gone are the day when firefighters showed up and just waited for the tones to go off, like long gone. They have a lot of stuff that are required to be done every single call they go on. So just think about it for a minute. 18,000 incidents. Everyone has a report assigned to it. Those reports can take anywhere from 15 minutes if it's a small EMS type call, up to an hour plus if there's, and more if there's an investigation that goes into the fire side of it. A lot of different work goes into that. They have to report and document everything that they're testing, everything on the equipment. They have apparatus and station maintenance. They pull their own weeds. They shovel their own snow. They plow their own stations. They vacuum, they mop, they do everything they're required to. They're required for training. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Physical PT. Some people say, well, you get to come and work out. It's a requirement by NFPA so that we can reduce cardiac issues that are one of the top killers of firefighters. So we require them to do an hour of PT every day. It's not optional, it's required. Program work, we talked about. We average about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the size of the program. Remember, that's required every single day. Public contacts, you all know those. Some of you have scheduled them, participated with them. They show up at the station. We show up at the schools, whatever it might be. Those are all part of our daily operational. Those impact our ability to get everything done. mind you, the big overlay of why we're here, customer response, right, is 18,000 calls that go within every one of these things every single day. So when we talk about training, because we're in a high-risk profession, we're required to maintain certifications and training so that our members are prepared when 911 is called, whatever the case might be. We've already talked about all risk. What that means, they're required to be able to cover the entire scope of everything that Chief Fennell talked about last time about operationally what we do. And within that, last year in 2024 alone, we had 32,000 logged hours of training. So on top of everything we had on the slide before and 18,000 calls. Those required trainings include firefighter, company, and multi-company level. They include EMS, basic or advanced life. So if it's an EMT, which is our minimum, or a paramedic, which is our advanced, driving, pump operations, everything with it. And then specialized skills like special operations, hazmat, technical rescue, arson, SWAT medic, et cetera. All of these are required and maintained by our members as well. So before I go to that one thing I want to pause on, message that I'm trying to paint, I should say, is the individuals that show up at 0800 and get off 48 hours later, they're strapped, they're taxed, they're stretched extremely thin to try to get everything done and to maintain with where we're at. We've heard it for years. We've heard it for, I would say, decades from our team that we're getting stretched too thin. We're getting stretched too thin. So our responsibility is to try to figure out how do we continue to support them and meet the demands of the community. And I think we've maxed out in every single capacity that we can possibly think of. So I want to just pause real quick and I want to go back to overall. I talked to you about support services. I'm responsible for the finances. What's changed in funding? One thing I want to point out on this slide, this was provided by our finance team, so I appreciate that, Ms. Brandy. I saw you on here. There's a big number right there. We're minus 17% from what it was the year before. And I just wanted to highlight that because it looks funny. The reason is because that's when the pension liability was paid off through that certificate of participation. So the cost of the fire department dropped significantly that year, that first year, this 21-22. That's why it shows that we're down 17% from what we were funded the year before. Moving forward, 5.8, 5.7, 3.3, you start looking at some of these numbers, and I'm going to point out a couple because numbers aren't always what they seem. This isn't a magic trick. It's just the reality. Contractual, 1.3, and then all of a sudden jumps to 2 million. Well, that looks like we got some really good funding. Oh, we're back up to 1.9. We got another really good funding, 1.6. That's one line we're going to talk about. Capital, we're at 1 million. All of a sudden this year, it looks like we got 5 million. This year, we got another 5 million. This year, we got another 5 million. That's not necessarily what's happening. What's happening is big purchases of capital take 3 to 5 years to get. So you might get funded in 2021. You might get funded in this year, right here in capital, and you got all of a sudden $4 million of capital approved. Well, you don't get it for 4 years. So we do what we call carry forwards. So that same money gets carried into this every year. So I just want the team to understand that while we're looking at it as a whole, it's not actual what we get every year separately. These monies, a lot of these haven't been expensed. The other thing I want to show you is here are all of these highlighted areas. These are things and equipment that we could not purchase yet because they were either not available or they're assigned to a piece of equipment. So as a result, all of these are carried forward. And that's why this one, 1.3 to 2, is because that equipment hasn't been purchased yet. So I only feel like this is really important to explain when you're looking at it. Just when you look at the total, our base operating budget is somewhere around $15 million every year. When you look at it and it shows 20 some odd million dollars, understand some of that is, a lot of that is one time that hasn't been expensed. Okay. I don't want to bore you anymore with the numbers until I come back, so I apologize, but why we're here. We're going to get into really why and how we got here. The general fund, as we know, is not able to keep up with current costs of our ability to do business and the demands of the community. Inevitably, we have to plan not only how to get to where we need to be today, but how are we gonna set ourselves up to get to where we need to be tomorrow to become a modern fire-based fire department? That's what we're gonna dive into for the next, looking at your timeline, hour. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to. Did I skip one? Great, okay. You go back. Sorry. Thank you, Chief Fennel. This is an important one because it talks about support services and what we were doing. It's a lot of words. I apologize, not as many graphics. Programs and support services, we talked about, they're failing because we've got people trying to do it out on the operational floor, and we have very, very, very limited staff administratively. Very, and we'll see those gaps as we get down in about 20 minutes from now. Training we talked about. We've had to pull off captains twice now, and they're still off the line to oversee programs that were having some significant issues and gaps that needed to be filled. So as an example, we've got a dispatch liaison, a captain that we sent over to assist with PD, because the workload of dispatch is so much on that side. Our piece of the puzzle to be able to get the fire side, the EMS side, and everything operational and working was a gap they couldn't get to. So we had to pull a member off of our line to start helping with that gap. That's an example of how we've done it. The other thing is we've pulled a captain off the line to assist with project management over facilities and fleet. We have those 8 facilities, 40+ apparatus. We can't maintain them all. We pulled one captain off and they're running like crazy trying to keep up with some of these things. They can't do it, but they're doing a much better job because we were failing. We had fail points. We had apparatus going out of service. We had apparatus. We were in the wrong type of apparatus many times because the correct type of apparatus had failures or breakdowns or were missing equipment. So those are things that we've been dealing with. Academy. We had to pull a captain off to oversee the academies. So whenever we pull somebody off the line, there's a cause and effect, right? It's pull the web. When we pull them off the line, Chief Fennel's ability to maintain his staffing and oversee everything gets reduced. Also, a lot of those people were involved in programs. Now they're out on these singular specific projects and those programs go to a complete stop. The final thing is when we pull these people off, because we can't fund it right now, we have to cover our gap. Failure is not an option for us. It's not. The community expects us to be able to maintain it, and that's what we've done to the extreme, but we have what's called mandatories or forced overtime. Last year in 2024, we had over 250 recall. A recall means you're off tomorrow. You're working today, but you're off tomorrow. We don't have enough staff for tomorrow. You can't go home. That's a forced mandatory. That happens on holidays, weekends. Our days don't matter. 365, they're color coordinated. Monday through Sunday doesn't matter. The day, the shift matters. So 250 times last year alone, we told somebody, you may not go home, or I understand you got time off tomorrow, you're coming in. This isn't a difference from overtime. Overtime is I can make things work and I'll be there and I'll take the overtime. This is a forced, you don't have a choice, come in. Those are some of the impacts that are happening in support services and why it's changed. Thank you for bringing me back to that slide.
Any questions for Mark at this juncture? Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some standards of cover and we'll get into some of the studies that we've done. And one of the big things is why do communities do a standards of cover? And what it is an independent study that comes in, they look at your system, they look at your risk, they look at everything that you have, response times, the whole gamut of things. And then they come up with recommendations on here's what you should do with that information. So we know Flagstaff is growing upward and outward, and there's a whole lot of new developments that increase safety risk, not just the call volume. Whenever you have a building like this is the hub. It's located at Milton, just south of the railroad tracks. And whenever we look at this, the way it's constructed, the way it's put together is lightweight building construction. So 2x6 material, OSB sheeting, everything else, it's the same material that they're using to build houses with. So whenever we look at this, this is a 4-story, 600-bedroom house. That's the kind of risk that we have in our community. And that's the kind of things that the standard of cover comes in to look at to say, you prepared if this building were to go up in flames, if you had a fire there, what would that look like? So it's good that we get these done. It helps to line our current strategies and everything else. Whenever we started our stations in certain locations, whenever we started our efficiency staffing of knowing that we don't have enough people to staff all the units that we need to make things happen, it was based on a much smaller footprint of what Flagstaff is, which with a much different risk than what we have today. So resources are stretched, the capacity, and it's no longer sustainable. So these studies, they evaluate whether today's system can protect tomorrow's Flagstaff. So we move over to this next slide. All of the things in the studies are based off of NFPA 1710, which is our staffing standards, defines the baseline expectations. It's not aspirational goals. It's not something that we say, hey, we think this is what it should look like. It's based on efficiency of work done, based on number of people that are on a unit, and it's based on how quickly you can get that there. So like this one shows for fire suppression, we want 4 firefighters there on each engine and each. We want the first engine or Quint to get there within 4 minutes. And in our studies that we've done, the 4-minute benchmark is pretty attainable in most of the city just based on where our stations are located. The other thing that it looks at is you want to have 17 firefighters on scene within 8 minutes. That's for keeping a fire small. It doubles in size for every minute. Faster we can get there, faster we can get inside. Faster we can get the fire out, limit damage, rescue people. It needs to happen. If we have a fire in something that looks like the hub, we need to have 42 firefighters there within 10 minutes. And one of the other things that we have is on the EMS side. So right now we staff all of our units, which can be a rescue, it can be an engine or a Quint. We staff all these with at least 1 paramedic. And so we're a little bit behind on staffing with 2 paramedics also. We've got some really good success stories of 2 paramedic responses to cardiac arrest and being patients back, and it shows that effectiveness of people that can get on scene as quick as possible and start those life-saving measures.
I do have a quick question. For the 42 within 10 minutes, how many on average are on staff at a given time for all the stations to acquire that 42? What would that?
If we wanted to do 42, we have to send every station that we have, and then we're still short. So we have 23 people on each day. So if that gives you an idea, it's almost double what we have on duty right now today to meet that 42.
There's a statement up there.
So 42 firefighters required within 10 minutes. We do not have that personnel on board. How do those get approved?
So NFPA is a national fire protection recommendation. So it's based on studies. It's based on mostly on the number of people, how fast fire extends, it burns, it gets bigger. That's what they base it off of. And we've got some charts that are in the study that show the difference between a 3-person, 4-person crew, things like that. So this is really the benchmark. Most modern fire suppression efforts are based on this.
I think part of the question gets to the land use planning here in the community.
Correct.
And great question, right? So the land use plan, typically when we see land use plans in some communities, general plans, what they indicate is if we have orderly, balanced, mixed development, the revenues will be sufficient to match the demand requirements of not only fire, AD, public works, streets, snow plows, all those elements. What we have experienced is as we implement the city's community plan is those assumptions are not quite there. You know, with the land use plan already in place, what we have been able to do, for instance, if somebody comes in and there's been a lot of dialogue about Northern Arizona Healthcare's hospital. Well, for us, that was a big issue because they proposed to move into an area of the community that was essentially rural or open space. In our system, and you're gonna see pictures of our system, we were nowhere near that. And it was the highest demand that we would have ever had in the community with respect to risk. High rise and institutional, i.e. people that cannot sell a building. So for us, it was a bit of a concern, and we worked very closely with NIH to deal with strategies associated with that. But that assumption and what we've shared with you is the general plan assumptions and its impact on the general fund, been able to match that quote. Those assumptions are not clearly articulated. And so what we do is when we see orderly development of the community, i.e. development that is consistent with what the community has said, we're not really in much of a position to leverage the developer or resources when that's what the community has said they want in the general plan. When they change it, then we can enter into that conversation. That's what happened with the hospital. But as you can see, it's not quite aligned with respect to general fund resources and the development of the community.
And that's completely understandable. Where do they limit the building with the amount of people that could be endangered compared to our firefighting staff? At a zoning level or a city council level, where's that being taken into consideration for the lives that could be at risk because we don't have the firefighters that can get there because it's such a large structure with so many possible safety issues?
Is that where you talk about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I put on my developer hat, my development services hat, take it with a grain of salt, but I've been involved in development services for a long time here in this community and in a high growth environment as well. And the only place that you can, where communities can really kind of make an impact on that is at the entitlement phase. And so when zoning is coming in, we see the ability to kind of work with developers and work with the community to put safeguards in place or at least have that conversation. That's where it has to happen. Typically after zoning is in place, there is no such thing as we're going to have a conversation now about how we're going to be able to meet the requirements resource-wise to provide fire, police, public works, snow plowing. That ship has sailed. And the community doesn't have much leverage or ability to enter into that conversation. Fair enough, Shannon?
Because then. That's fair.
PA 1710 is a standard separate from International Building Code, correct? So if somebody comes in and says, I want to build this and it meets the specific requirements, fire prevention has got the ability to impact sprinkler heads, authority having jurisdiction from my understanding, but it's separate from NFPA 1710, which I think is where maybe some of this confusion is coming from.
Good clarification. The NFPA standards, we adopt very few of the NFPA standards. One of the most prevalent ones that are in adoption is the National Electric Code, is an NFPA code. The codes that we use to guide us in modern administration of the fire department and to protect our firefighters are the NFPA standards, but the authority having jurisdiction typically doesn't adopt them outright. Good point. So it does not have the effect of law unless it's adopted by the local authority having jurisdiction. Thank you for the clarification. I will miss.
Any other questions? So as you can see, looking at this slide, we've had quite a few different studies that have come in and looked at different things. It was different consultants that were all independent. They had different data. They all came to the same general findings. Some of the findings again are NFPA 1710, so that there's something in there that they can use as a gauge. instead of just a best guess or here's what it should be. So that was the data that they based that off of. As you can see, we've gone through 5 different studies over 20 years. The most recent one was in 2022. That one was in conjunction with the hospital and that new growth coming to the south side of Flagstaff. So the ones that offered some position increases were 17 Public Safety Research Group. They came in and said we needed 32 new positions. 15 of those were operational and the other 17 were administrative. Fast forward to 2022, whenever this one came in, they were only looking at the operational side of things. Put out that we needed 69 new firefighters to bolster our staffing up. So it was interesting to see that. These were the other findings that they saw. They said our engine and quint crews should be 4-person crews. They said that the city should have staff bare minimum, but really needs 2 because of the risks in our city. And then additional rescue units were an idea to put out there so that the fire crews stayed available. What that means is using a rescue that looks like an ambulance, 2 people, send those to medical calls so that the engine is freed up or the quint is freed up so they can respond to fires or anything else that's needed. They also identified that Flagstaff needed additional station capacity as the city continues to grow. One of the earlier studies had a new station going in, like 4th Street and Cedar. And the way the stations are allocated now moved out. That need has diminished a little bit, but came back and said, if you're doing the JW Powell corridor development over there, you need to think about that. If there's going to be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 homes in that area, we don't have the service to support that. One of the big things with this is that the consistency from the different evaluations that have come in really gave us confidence that this is something that we need to look at and address. So whenever we looked at our current staffing situation compared to what the standard recovery recommended, and again, this is the 2022 version. So whenever we look at this, the current reality is we operate out of 6 fire stations. And in those 6 fire stations, we have 5 engines that are in service and 1 quint that's in service. So we took an engine out at station 1 and we put a quint in service so that we're running fire suppression and everything else out of there. So currently 5 engines, 1 quint. We have 2 rescues since it's station 2 and station 3. And staff with 1 paramedic per unit. And we have 1 battalion chief, which we really haven't talked about battalion chiefs before, boss of the shift. So whenever something gets toned out, they're the incident commander. They are the supervisor. They're doing evaluations. They're doing coaching, mentoring. They're busy doing a lot of stuff. And as you can see, whenever you start looking at span of control, they're a little bit beyond where we want to see people at with having 8 people underneath them to supervise. So fast forward to the 2022 standards of cover, what they recommended was 7 stations, 12 response units. That includes 7 engines, 2 quints, 3 rescues, 2 paramedics per unit, and then adding an extra battalion chief, so we have 2 in total. Questions on any of that?
How often do you conduct one of these studies?
We don't really have a
2022, and obviously it's probably significantly outdated given the amount of construction that has occurred since then.
One of the big things that we saw whenever we look at the one from 2017 to 2022, it was pretty wild to see. In 2017, they said we needed 15 people. And then for fast forward to 2022, it was 69. And that's just the operations side. That's a pretty significant increase. But as far as regularity,
Make sure I understand how often are standards of cover analysis done? They're done every 2 to 3 years in departments that are accredited. So our most contemporary accrediting body at in the fire service is the Center for Public Safety Excellence. So they accredit fire departments if they meet standards. The standards of cover is typically done every 2 to 3 years. as you see, we don't have the administrative horsepower and to make that type of analyses. It's driven by travel time studies and taking data and actually applying it to how is your performance on data. So it's a big lift for a department to do that. We've had the ability to, and we're really grateful for the ability to conduct the standards of cover study, thanks to our friends at NIH who funded that. We needed an analysis of the impact of that development for the hospital when they came to town. And so we were engaged already with a consultant to do a portion of the standards of cover. NIH came in, picked up the consultant. We had a complete citywide standards of cover done, and then very specific information associated with their proposed development. But it should be done every 2 to 3 years. It's tough. It's a big lift in an agency that's as busy as this and is resourced the way we are.
Since the 2017 study was done, do we have an idea on an average given year, how many fires we actually respond to? I'm not talking about dumpster fires, I'm talking about structural fires with buildings and stuff. We respond to on an average year.
I can get that number for you. Most of our fires, we lump into the 100 code, which covers wildland, vehicles, car, like everything in there. Structure fires, I'm trying to think of how many we had in the last year. We get toned out to a lot of fires as far as real fires. Whenever you get there, it's burning, it's running through, it's more than that. It's actually somewhere between 20 and 30 of actual large structure fires that are into the size where they're at least one full room or beyond.
Is that a fairly typical average, or was that an unusual year?
It's a fairly typical average.
Okay.
Yeah. It's usually like, I don't know, call volume, whenever you look at it, fires are about 1%. They're low frequency, but
We refer a lot to 32 people or 23 people on per day, but these numbers are showing 32 positions, 69 positions short. That's for the entire department, not per shift, correct?
correct. For this study in 2017. Correct. Next slide breaks it out a little clearer for them. Again, that's what they recommend. And whenever they're looking at this, one of the big things that they look at is overlapping incidents. So as we pointed out, if we get a fire, we're sending all the stations in the department over there. If we get something else that's in there, we don't have the capacity to staff the second incident like we do the first. And that's a big thing that the study looked at is we don't have that resiliency in your community for emergency responses. And it's not just fires, it's wrecks, it's car accidents, it's medicals, it's chest pain, heart attack, everything else. We send everything that we have over there and they're for 2 or 3 hours. It makes it challenging to continue to staff in the region and respond to calls and everything else. So, and then closing these gaps, it's not so much about the growth as it is about just sustaining the operations as our city continues to grow. What we've seen, nothing is slowing down. This slide, so this one came out of the last standards of cover, and whenever you're looking at the slide on the left, you can see the little plus signs. That's going to be where fire stations are. This is with 6 fire stations with the staffing that I just showed you on the previous slides.
I have one question for you. On the previous slide, it said 1 battalion chief per shift. Is that correct?
Correct.
But that's the battalion chief for all the 6 stations?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's a big area to cover and
A lot of people.
yeah, the intention is we keep one at station 2 and then we put another one in a new station over at station 7 on the J. Wesley Powell Corridor. And that's why whenever you look at this map, you're going to see that orange spot that's in the middle. That's the J. Wesley Powell development. And the purple lines that are on there, whenever you look at the thing up above, it's trying to get our staffing in place with 8 units that we have right now how much can they penetrate into the city in 8 minutes and put 17 people on scene for a firefight. So whenever you look at the purple in that, those are the areas that we can get to the system right now today. The slide on the right is the standard to cover recommend with 12 units. That's the area that we can cover in the same time frame in that 8 minutes. And we can get to pretty much everything that we need to in the city in that 8 minute time frame with enough people to staff the incident if it scales up. Enough people to come in and cover that. If there's another incident, we don't have our entire city committed to the incident. We can still put units around to hit whatever else we need to.
Can you describe for me what would, like, what kind of fire is that?
So house fire.
A house fire,
Sorry,
bigger than one room, would require a response of 8 units with 17 firefighters in 8 minutes. Thank you.
and it's, we don't just limit it to that. It could be a hazardous materials spill. It could be a train wreck downtown. It could be an active shooter incident. There is a whole lot of things, and we talked about the 3-in-1 responses where we go 3 units and 1 battalion chief. So if we need extra help, we say, give us, upgrade that to a first alarm, send me another 3-in-1. And dispatch says, I'm going to send you 3 more units, 1 more battalion chief. And that's kind of how our system is, with pulling other resources in and trying to get things taken care of.
Here's how the railroad tracks impact that time of service and how Lone Tree Overpass might help that. I mean, it strikes me that a lot of that time is because you got to go around, right?
It is, and whenever they were looking at this, it looks to me like it was put together without the train, because you don't know how much time it takes, but yeah, we've had numerous incidents where Station 2 comes out of the station, there's a train there, so they call Station 4, and Station 4 responds down to that same corridor, because it's gonna be quicker than waiting for the train, and it's faster than going all the way down to 4th Street over and backtracking, and yeah, the train does, it definitely slows us down.
The travel time analyses, any travel time analyses that we have won't have an accommodation for the train.
So it assumes no train.
It assumes no train. We haven't seen a way for us to accommodate the randomness of when the train's gonna be there. And so what you see is typically, you're not seeing that. This, what the chief has described, is a very real and manual system that goes on every day. Where people say, we're blocked by a train, send another unit, if there's another unit. That's the other.
Are ways within modernizations of the CADs to tie into like what BNSF has. It does factor that in the response routing of calls, as it will identify when trains are coming through based on their schedule and correctly route, but it's all upgrades with the system of having that.
Questions? Turn it over to Chief Wilson.
Okay. So we've kind of covered who we are, what we do, what's changed. We've covered some of the standard of cover from multiple studies that have shown where those gaps are. So with all of that in mind, we put all of it and compiled it into a complete database that started identifying what were some of the costs, what were some of the gaps, what are some of the costs, and that's predominantly why you are all here today. So I'm going to walk through a couple of things, but the big thing is, this is kind of a depiction in our minds, and you've seen historically why we feel of current funding and the growth, risk, and demand funded that we have organizationally that we just can't seem to cover in the general fund. The gap really is in 3 categories, and we're going to focus on these 3 big categories specifically: personnel and staffing, capital and equipment, and current operations. And we're going to talk real quick on each one of those, but we'll make sure that we're clear as we're walking through what is that gap and what does that look like. So what is becoming a modern fire department, to take Chief Conley's term, and I apologize for hijacking it, but we went first, Chief. So becoming a modern fire department, we recognize that the road ahead means we've got some work to do. We've got to catch up first before we can even get ahead. How do we do this? What are the costs? What are the impacts? What are the risks? We know the risks. We've been talking about them for 1.5 times together so far, and last weekend today. And so we also know that we've taken every single efficiency and we've stretched it as thin as we possibly can. And we're at that point where we no longer have any other means of efficiency. Technology's been maximized, production's been maximized, location is minimally maximized. So we need to start thinking about how do we become that modern fire department to be able to meet today and tomorrow's demands. So with that, we're going to hit those three areas: staffing, the gap. These are new staffs. These are new positions that we're talking about today. These are not old. These are new. All of them are new. So if we use the standard to cover model, the new staffing, we would need 75 additional full-time employees, 25 per shift. Now, you remember we said early on, and I think somebody just qualified, what is the current staffing? It's at 30. 25 puts us at 55 per shift. The reason we're at 55 per shift is because 20% of those need time off. Time off, vacation, scheduled, unscheduled, everything that goes with it. All of you nodding your head, you're business owners, you understand this, right? So part of our challenge is if we have 55, 20% of those are not there. If you take off 20% of 55, you land at 44. That's our target. That's our standard to cover to be able to match the recommendation. So that's the 75 FTEs. What's the cost of that? And I'm going to just point down here. It includes operation, right? And maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and contractual and commodities. I've lumped them all in one. Otherwise, I'd have bored you to death with splitting them out. We're going to keep it large. We're going to keep them, I've got whole numbers you can see here. So I know Brandy and Heidi, our finance manager and director, are probably looking at this. I'm really close on these, but I made them really whole so that we can make easy kind of identification for my sake, and hopefully it resonates to all of you. So operationally, we're going to look at 1 year in time. When we put this all together, we did a 10-year plan. I'll show you a little screenshot of that later. 10-year plan. 2029 and 30, if we're to get to the ballot measure by your guys' decisions, and if it were to get approved and we started getting funding, the earliest we could start putting staff on is 29 and 30 because we need facilities to be able to put them on, and then we got to stagger them. We can't hire them all at once. It's impossible for us to be able to maintain that or do it. So I chose 29 and 30 as the actual cost, a 1 year look at what that is. And operational for those 75 full-time employees, that's a cost of $13.5 million. That's ongoing. Support services, 11 positions we identified from standard to cover where those gaps are, what we should have, what we need to administratively oversee, logistically oversee, all the things we talked about today. 11 full-time employees, that's at a cost of $2 million. And again, I want to remind, this is fully burdened, meaning everything that goes with it. If we put somebody on, there's an assumption we got to put somebody through an academy. We got to equip them. We got to get them prepared. We got to get them trained. All of that is included into this. All of their equipment, everything for that startup. Community risk reduction, Chief Denham's crew. We need 4 FTEs to get us to the standard to cover. That's to the cost of $750,000 for the 29 and 30 year, 1 year look. All of these are ongoing costs. So if you look at that, you're somewhere in the ballpark of about $16.25 million ongoing, right? We already know all of these can't be funded by the general fund, and we have gaps. We're going to get into another one identifying that we have that currently, let alone anything new. There's no revenue to be able to support this. So before I move off of this, this is staffing. Any questions on this one as to the why?
So does that start 29? Are you saying to get it to ballot 26, those funds start accumulating now, so you're hiring up to be fully staffed in 29, 30?
There's an assumption that we're fully staffed 29, 30. There's a methodology we'll work with the finance team and start pulling this all apart and figuring out how can we do it? What are the ways we can fund it? We don't want to dive into that today. We're just assuming if it started in 20 on our spreadsheet, all of those FTEs are full. Can we do it by then? I don't know, but I needed something for us all to be able to have a number to pull from. Okay. Any other questions before I get off of staffing? Next big gap was capital's big, not only in a lift, but it's also in a cost. So capital for operations, Chief Fennell's team, we need new Station 7. We need the apparatus and equipment that goes in Station 7. We need a new engine, one. We need a new battalion rig, and that station has a BC quarters, and it's gonna house a quint and an engine is a proposal. And we need a wildland engine, at least one wildland engine for that operations to be able to handle it. Here's the good news. We own both of our quints. We just ordered 2 quints in the last 4 years. 4 years, we've ordered 2 quints. One's not here yet. It's still 2 years out, but we ordered it 3 years ago. But the good news is we own those. So there's no capital cost with that, and they're already equipped for the most part. Okay, so that's funded. When you look at the operational cost of building Station 7 plus that apparatus and equipment, it's a one-time cost. That's important. As we talked, it's $19.5 million, round numbers. We move down to support service and community risk. This is an area that I will tell you, the admin facility in the 2004 bond election, it was part of the bond process. It was to relocate 4 stations, build a fire training facility and an admin facility. We ran out of money very quickly. It was 2004 through 8, 7. Guess what that was? That was a peak before the recession. So when we were buying materials and property and everything else, we were paying premium. So as a result, we were not able to purchase or build an admin facility in the training tower. Ironically, I was the battalion chief over training. By the time it was all said and done, we were supposed to have $4 million. I had $875,000 to build the training facility. Here's the one saving grace that helped us. The recession was the very next year. People were hungry. They just wanted to keep employees on. Some of you are in construction world, you remember that, right? So I was able to build a temporary training facility in the recession because of that for around $1.1 million. It was supposed to last 10 years because it was temporary. We're on year 17 right now. So with that, we've got a training tower that's included in this, and then the staff, the vehicles and equipment that are capital that go into supporting those positions we talked about last time. So our total cost for this one is $18 million. That's total initial combined costs. Any questions on that one? Capital.
So one time?
That's one time. That's one time as we're looking. Thank you, Shannon. All of these are specifically one time. Yes.
Lifespan of a quint.
Of a quint,
Yeah.
20 years, and I say 20. The city, we had to make an adjustment for a long time. We made it 25 plus years for our apparatus. We have 27-year-old engines running right now because we couldn't afford to replace them at that 20. The standard is no more than 20, depending on how progressive your organization is. Phoenix or some of the larger municipalities, you don't see them go probably a day class 7 to 10 years.
7 years.
So
So do we get a discount buying theirs for the next 13?
we've tried that. We bought used engines and refurbished them. It's just not cost effective.
We have a very conservative replacement schedule. Consequently, we spend quite a bit on maintenance. As you might guess, right? Keep an older apparatus in place, you're gonna spend more money on maintenance. And so that certainly plays out for us. It's cash flow.
Which it's a vicious cycle because it goes back to programs and who's responsible for all that? We are. How do we maintain all of that? It just keeps on cycling. The washing machine keeps tumbling. Any questions on these 2 costs, one time and what they're for? Okay, the next gap is current operations. So what these numbers are, these are what we do today. For us to operate today, there are approximately 500,000 in personnel and 1.4 million in contractual commodities that are not funded. Every budget year, we have to go and we get it in one-time funding. And then the next year, we go back and ask for the same thing again. And we hope we get one time, but it's baseline what we need to do our job today and tomorrow are wrapped up in what cannot be covered by the general fund right now, which is about 1.9, somewhere around $1.9 million total. That's at the 2930 cost. Again, I'm trying to be consistent on all these numbers on where I'm pulling them from. Bless you. So the reality is, this is current operational expenditures. Everything else before was new staffing, new capital. This is a gap we can't cover this next fiscal year. If we do cover it, like we have it for the past 6, 7, 8 years, it's been in one-time funding, and then we come back again and ask for it all over again. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so what is in this? These are things like operation support services, including overtime. That's not funded. Acting pay is not funded. Safety supplies that we're looking for replacement aren't funded. Academy costs. And when I say aren't funded, we get them in one time. I want to be really clear. And I told you all this in the very beginning. We are not standing up here saying the city is not supporting us. That is not the message we're communicating. We're communicating our general fund can't keep up with demand. That's what we're communicating today. And so when we look at things like safety supplies, we'll get them, but we have to ask for them. And when you're running 18,000 calls, guess what? And the cost of inflation and everything else is going up, you can see why the general fund can't keep up with it right now. So all of these things, I won't bug you and bore you, are all part of a necessary ongoing that's unfunded. We've got another thing down here, capitals. We have current stations. We have a station 4 that was built in 1987. That's very antiquated, even though it doesn't seem old, especially if we're thinking about it. What, 87 was a great year. But the fact of the matter was the upfits that are necessary. And when we think about some of our stations, they were designed originally for a maximum of 1 unit or 1 rescue, never 2. So we only have enough bunks to put 1.5 crews in. The goal was we could expand them. That's what this money is for, is to expand those like we designed them, to add additional bunks, additional capacity, additional everything that goes along with it, upgrade them, upfits, everything that's associated with what we need to get to a modern fire department with our current stations. Much different than this slide, which is all new. Station 7, admin, fire training facility, and the equipment associated with it. Oh, current operations. Any questions on this gap?
Chief, can you speak to some of the older stations and what some of the needs are with respect to occupational health and safety?
Yeah, so it's things like we don't have, so for our cancer initiatives, there are requirements that are supposed to be in stations on how to keep some of those carcinogens and some of those biohazards outside of your station. We don't have them in the new stations, as an example. We have older systems that are used to push out exhaust, as an example. We have not adequate separation between our personal protective equipment and our living quarters in our stations. We have older style tones. When tones go off, when I hired on, the tones went off in the whole city. Every fire station got the same tone, no matter where it was at. Then we got to the point where we said, hey, only if it's for your station. Well, modern fire department, if you've got multiple units, one should go up in their bunk and the other bunk shouldn't get pulled out. Right now it goes off and it wakes up the whole station. Who's up? You know who's up. Time to roll. Things like that are things that we're talking about. Digital dispatching and heart saver tones. So the way the tones go off, right? Instead of a loud, get up right now, they're finding heart attacks were starting to increase because in the middle of the night, people are getting jolted out. It's just human nature, even though it's your job. So they slowly have tones that wake you up, right? Things like that. All right? Okay. Matter of time. I think we're gonna make it. All right. I mean the gap. So here's the total. This is the big picture. This is kind of a final summary slide. These are our asks to get us to the modern fire department, not Cadillac version. We are saying to meet the standard of cover that all the analysis is pointed to since 2007. I've said, you need to upgrade, you need to increase. So the total in one-time funding is $43 million. The total in ongoing funding for staffing, round numbers, Miss Brandy, Miss Heidi, $18.25 million. Round number for capital, and there's a difference. This one, I'm gonna pause. The reason that this is not in this area of one time, these are things like cardiac monitor replacements. radio replacement. We have to start putting aside money to replace 14 cardiac monitors that are $50,000 a piece. We don't have the capacity to do that right now. So this is included in ongoing funding because we need to get more proactive in how we start thinking about it. Now, I want to just pause real quick and say, anything that we're currently using, stations, facilities, apparatus, equipment, for the most part, I say for the most part, are not included in this, other than that ongoing that we were talking about, the one gap, the ongoing. But replacement of fleet, that's currently still going to fall on the shoulders of the general fund. Maintenance of facilities that we currently own, that's on the general fund. All the firefighter costs and burden rates associated with our employees today on the general fund. We are only talking about new. How do we move new? Those three areas. How do we get staffing to move us to a modern fire department? How do we get the locations, the stations to meet what Chief Fennell was talking about on the NFPA 1710 and the response model? How do we do that? And we talked about fires. Fire department responds to fires, but the reality is any given day, 5, 6, 7 units are out responding to calls. That's why Guardian has doubled their amount. Guardian didn't double the amount because they weren't going to calls. Vince is listening. They doubled the amount because they're so busy they have to. We haven't. We talk about that modern fire department, where are we at looking forward? When I heard on in 1992, I probably didn't think in 34 years we're going to increase one station and one unit. But the city's going to do what it's done. That's the gap. That's where we're at. So with that, again, all of these numbers include fully burdened. Don't worry about the spreadsheet. Don't want you to read it. Don't need you to read it. This is something you're going to become intimately familiar with as you all start to work through this process down the road to identify what funding is, how much of it can we afford, and where are some of those costs. Besides being super easy right here, this is the actual ask that we're needing. These are all the individual breakdowns through the whole thing. In each one of these, there's buckets and tabs in this maroon color. You guys are going to go through this. Every one of them is a bucket that's associated with the general overview of all fire operations that are unfunded, that one-time unfunded gap, positions, Station 10 and fire training facility, Station 7, admin, Station 2 is a second quint. That's added in the staffing already. So all of these have been added in. All of these tabs are added in to this number right here. But as you start working through what do we and can we and how much is it really, you'll become familiar with this. Yes, sir.
So the numbers on the previous slide, those are static numbers, whether they're ongoing or one time. It's a number that doesn't change over whatever that period of time is. Okay, so if we're looking at $43 million annual cost, it's not going to become $50 million 2 years later or 60 million. It's still the same $43 million. Okay. So my question is, if you add more staffing, more people, you've got ongoing costs such as raises, retirement, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. What would be the impact to the general fund over time?
So let me answer the first part, and then I might ask Ms. Shannon to weigh in because I don't want to get out of my lane and talk about general fund. But let me just go back to one other thing. This right here is a 10-year look. Not to confuse with this is a 10-year ask. This is a 10-year look, right? So it assumes escalation, pay raises, normal escalators, CPI, everything else that you want to walk through to figure out inflationary escalation associated with it. All of that is put in. When I chose these numbers, I just chose this 20, 29, and 30. It's because it's when we have all of our personnel on. It will continue to go up from there. This cost, all of you or most of you are business owners. You're definitely homeowners. You know what happens. This cost next year is going to be more. This cost next year is going to be more. What I can tell you on the front end, then I'll turn it over to Ms. Shannon, is the general fund can't afford any of this right now. Not at all. There's no capacity or we wouldn't have had this slide. in operations. We wouldn't have $2 million that we can't fund right now with the general fund. So moving forward, the general fund, the impact to the general fund, if we don't have a revenue source or another revenue source that's identified, none of this can happen.
In the ask,
Yes,
we are asking,
yes.
does it increase over time to accommodate these increases or not?
Yes. I think what you're asking is dependent on the type of funding streams you decide upon or forward, right? The challenge is, at some point in time, let's just say for an example, as a bond is a one-time, right? So you cover that $43 million or however you want to do it. If you go to a sales tax, you have to put it at a flat rate typically, but you have options that you'll work with management service on. You can front load for capital and have it a higher tax rate for the first so many years to cover capital instead of doing a bond. And then you can drop it back down to cover personnel. But what you will not do is be able to keep up with every year the inflation. So the general fund will have to start picking some of that up eventually. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting. It's because what we're asking the community for is not something that they can count on from year after year after year, because like, for example, if you do a sales tax, there's no guarantee that in 5, 6, 7 years, we won't have a recession and sales taxes will decrease, okay? Which impacts, whatever we're funding, okay? There may be years when we have great years and we get a lot more money than what we need. But whatever the number is, whatever we ask for, the community is going to have some kind of understanding as to how that's going to shift and change over time.
Absolutely.
Based on the economy itself and what the needs happen to be and inflation. So it's going to be hard for the consumer, for the citizen to grasp and say, okay, this is what I can expect, when you really don't know what to expect.
I think you're spot on. And I'm going to tell you right now, I bet Rick Tatter, his ears are really perked, because that is going to be a whole dialogue and discussion with all of you of how do we balance this out? And what does that look like moving forward? If it looks like this in 29 and 30, what does it look like 5 years from now? So that's going to get worked through with all of you.
So do these numbers include wildland too?
Okay, short answer is all risk units are wildland response units. Every single fire station, every single unit in there is who responds to a wildfire. That's the true answer to that. Now, there is a separate entity within the fire department called the Wildland Fire Management Division, and that has a separate funding source that is not included in this, and we're going to talk about that February 4th. But make no mistake, if a wildfire breaks out this afternoon or in July 1st, these people are the ones going to put it out.
You're getting into my time. All right, we're gonna wrap up. This is kind of the last slide. These numbers are big, and I get it. And I think one of the things we understand is the reason they're this big is because of what we showed you very early on in the first evening, is we haven't invested along the way. And so we find ourselves at kind of this fork in the road where we're dealing with larger numbers than anyone ever would have anticipated. And we understand that. This is a big ask of the community. Fortunately, I think there are lots of ways that can be approached. And when you get into that conversation with management services, there's a lot of ways, and we have a great team and they're very creative. And so you'll kind of work through the details of the concerns. What do we do about a recession? Have we built in enough inflationary cost, whether it's employee related expenses or whether it's just, it costs more to keep the lights on? So all those things are fair questions I think you'll work through. But for us, that fork in the road looks like a couple things. It's It's, are we going to have enough resources to deal with the risks that we're building into the community and have built? Are we going to sustain and improve response times? The train is one issue. Have you tried to drive across town lately? That's another issue that affects response time. So having the appropriate amount of fire apparatus, firefighters in place, distributed across the community is an important part of maintaining response times for us. And the availability of available units. We have to send more units because we have less people on those units. And so we end up sending everything we have typically. Fully staffed, some of the risk that we have, we could send a portion of it and we can be more than a one incident fire department, more than a one incident community. Right now, we are literally, we are one incident and we're gonna tie up everything we have. Daily staffing, adequate numbers of paramedics. I'll get to, and I'm on the other side of the list. It talks about burnout and attrition. I've never seen so much burnout from a perspective of paramedic certifications as I have since I've come to Flagstaff. We ask single medics to do a lot. In a lot of places, most places that all the places I've worked at, having a second paramedics by your side is a lifesaver in the context of the stress of being the highest level of care on the scene at that point in time. We have people dropping their paramedic certifications because it's just too much after so many years. I'm not seeing it to the extent that I've seen it in Flagstaff. That's a problem for us because we need more paramedics on the scene to support them, support each other, and to provide the best patient care we can to our citizens. And so we really, there's a link between daily staffing, available paramedics, and it's a little bit different, but for every person that is on the line as a firefighter, they may or may not be a paramedic. What we're saying is we need funding to have more of them be certified to that level. And then safe stations, supporting operations, you know, the fire prevention's a big deal. It's that piece about preventing the worst day in your life. We're in the worst day of your life business. And so the prevention side of what we do is our opportunity to prevent that. And so it's an equally important part of a modern fire department's capability. It's no longer either or. If you go down to, if we're not funded, increasing response times, continued short staffing, particularly for our medium and our high risk types of calls, whether it's wildland fire or an EMS call on the 4th floor of the hub. Continued burnout attrition, that's an issue. We're starting to experience attrition. We haven't talked about that as much. We're losing firefighters where we had generally done a much better job of keeping them. That crisis Rick talked about a lot, that affordable housing piece. It's not just our problem in Flagstaff. That's an issue in the context of sometimes it just gets easier to work a little closer to where I live. I've called a couple fire chiefs and said, you're getting one of our good ones and we're not happy about it. But let them know that we understand why they left and like them back. I've had that conversation more than once. Increased insurance premiums. We know that the resource requirement is running away from our ability to meet the requirements of insurance services office. What that means is we are seeing our insurance services classification go the other way. When that happens, we're going to start going down ISO points. When that happens, our business owners and our residential ratepayers set aside the whole wildland fire. Our typical ISO costs that are influencing what you pay for insurance in the community is going to be jeopardized. We'll talk more about that. We're going to get to come back on that.
He has a question. Go ahead.
Sorry, was that for me? Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate this fork in the road way of talking about this. And I would like, whenever it's time to do this, for this to help paint the picture. Give us numbers, give us specific examples. Increasing response times by how much? Add something in there that can really help us to paint a picture for us. And then this gets rolled out to the community, it will have a huge impact to really having a tangible, concrete understanding of what you mean by all this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're doing good.
I got 4 minutes. Fortunately, I just felt my second wind come in. So, and just the inadequate fire facilities. That's the other thing I just want to say. Our facilities, we know so much more about how to protect firefighters from occupational related diseases, cancer, heart attacks than we did when we started building fire stations in the city of Flagstaff. And there's a lot of things we need to do to improve that, and to protect our firefighters over the course of a career. So we understand that those are some things that we need to get to, and without identifying additional or different revenues, we're not going to be able to get to it. So that's kind of where we're at. And we're here. We have 3 minutes, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Click on the additional personnel. You're looking at increasing the personnel. I also look back on our pension fund that we were talking about prior. How does that impact that?
So there's a give and take on the pension. The more people you bring into it, the more stabilized it becomes. And so because we have currently funded our pension deficit, we are maintaining that with what we are putting in as the city and what our full burden rate is. So when I put those full burden rate costs, that includes all the pension assumptions that go along with that. And so the good news is the more people you put into it, the more stabilized it actually becomes. But it's all accounted for.
It is accounted for.
Yes.
Shortfalls, we ante up when it's happening, so it doesn't grow. Rick can probably.
As in the
talk to
past,
it.
right?
I think we contributed an additional, was it $1 million last year for the police department? Is that right?
I think it was closer to 2 million to maintain our 100% funding. We also have our contingency fund, about 14 million, just in case we do fall behind on funding. But to add to what was said is the new positions, there's 2 different plans or 3 different plans within the pension fund. And as we add new people who have not been on the system in the past, it's more of a cost share liability, a different type of benefit plan than the tier 1 and tier 2 that we had prior to the state and the voters making changes to that plan. That's where we had the bigger liabilities grow. So that's a closed plan now. So by adding a lot more staff, it shouldn't have too big of a negative impact on the tier 1, tier 2. The others should maintain their funding based on a cost sharing.
That contingency that Rick speaks to is built inside of the local pension fund. So we have the ability to, when Rick and the team put together the program, they built that capacity for recession hits. Some other unknown factor, what devastated the plan years ago was bad investments at the state level. And so our ability to deal with those ebbs and flows on the pension plan, we're very well situated to deal with, the ongoing types of concerns that might come up with maintaining a pension plan.
So I'm curious with the Flagstaff Regional Land Use Plan. I know they don't solve any funding issues, but in that plan, how well were these current extraordinary gaps recognized, and how well did it account for increasing demand over the next 20 years?
It does not address the increasing demand over the next 20 years at all. What it did do is we were able to look at the land use plan, and our known at that time fire station locations were there. And so what I do, and Chris Jack, our fire marshal, participates in the IDS program where development proposals come through the city of Flagstaff. And what we look at is the proposed development within a service area of an existing or proposed fire station, J.W. Powell being one of those areas. And then is it risk, i.e. is it residential, is it houses, which we anticipated, or is it high-rise residential? And so we have the ability to enter into conversations associated with that. But that's how we look at it. That's how we interact with that area plan today. But it doesn't have the ability for us to necessarily tweak it and address some of these concerns.
Question on burnout and attrition. So if we're not maintaining our current employees and we have a high turnover rate, our operations cost is gonna go extremely up due to additional training for each person that's coming in. And burnout and turnover due to 250 mandatory overtimes and 3,800 hours of overtime. Are you seeing people leaving due to that because we don't have the staff to be able to pick up?
Everybody leaves for the wrong reason. When we do exit interviews, you know, there's this old saying in the fire service, people don't get fed up and leave, they get fed up and stay. And that's really impacting our paramedics right now as a new group, our existing firefighters. It's just hard on them and they're staying and they're loyal. We have guys that work 4 jobs so they can stay in this community. So, you know, that's kind of the impact of it, but it's wearing on them. They may not quit, but I might be dealing with mental health treatment. And I have, and we do. Chief and I are very blessed to have new services available because of the city council for our firefighters. That is mental health services. Does a mandatory affect mental health? Yeah, it really does. You have got plans and the BC calls and says, you gotta stay. You've been here 48 hours. We need you another 24. And that is a way of life. Vince talked about it. I can tell he's feeling it, and has done that. I don't know if they're to the level that we are, but I'll tell you, that's a big issue for us. So, just mandatories are a symptom of some of the things that we're watching out for. Taking care of our folks, would involve trying to manage that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
From the last one on the line side over here, not the right.
I'm not so proud of it.
It's very easy. It's very easy to see wear and tear on an engine and tear on equipment. You look at 7 years, you know, just talked about that, 7 years, and then 7 years in reserve to maintain the length of an engine. We don't get to go in reserve. Part-time. We don't get to go on less calls. We don't get to go when you got a guy who's 25, 30 years into the career, you don't get to downsize. And there's things you can do to offset some stuff. Drop your paramedic, drop some of the program work that you get towards the end of your career, but the calls are still the same. The calls are the calls. And so you don't get to see the wear and tear on the people that you see versus the wear and tear on the engine. And so that's where trying to maximize on the front end some of this behavioral health, redemption counseling. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things to maintain longevity is to distribute that call load, to send the right units to the right calls. Partnerships with the other agencies for mutual aid, so the right number of people are responding to calls, all of that stuff, the personnel management. It's the number one most expensive piece of apparatus that exists in the fire service is the people. And for a long time, it's the least maintained and least focused on piece of apparatus in the fire service because you don't see the wear and tear in the long term. So that's kind of the personal side answer. of it. And it does wear, it'd be good to have all the wives and husbands and kids come stand up here and answer questions, but you know, that's the reality of it. And it's not a complaint. I'll tell you what, every time that the phones go off, we're gonna respond to the call. Show up for shifts, we do it, we want to do it. People don't stay around just for because, you know, we're committed to it, doing it. But it is that long-term wear and tear, the unintended consequences of the longevity of the job and where it ends up. So that's my answer, my 2 cents on it with you.
For the group, it adds here that firefighter mental health is a proposed rule for OSHA, so that's what we had shared in the chat.
And I'll tell you this too, I don't know, firefighting itself has been listed by the cancer, the IARC, International Research Association on Cancer, as a class 1 carcinogen. It's one of the few jobs that are listed in there as a class 1 carcinogen. Basically, they've identified it is directly related to cancer. And it comes from all of it, the stress, the exposure, increase in everything, you know, so that's one of the things working to mitigate as well, where we're going to see not just necessarily burnout and attrition, but lack of interest in the career down the road. If the support system isn't there, we're going to be okay for now. But new incoming firefighters, longevity of, you know, if that's not there with the support, that's the next part of it. And it's not, you're not going to have burnout and attrition because you're going to have nothing to burn out. And
That's a good point, Ellen. Thank you for bringing that up. Our last recruit academy, Flagstaff Fire carried 2 vacancies. We couldn't fill them. And so 2 vacancies, other firefighters have to work more. So contributing to just kind of the network of things that can influence whether somebody gets mandatory or just has to work overtime. Not every overtime is mandatory. When I started hiring firefighters in 1986, I would have never have dreamed that I'd have a hard time finding applicants. I've been in recruitment processes where we said, listen, when you get 300 applications out for our 6 positions, just stop giving them out. We don't want to see more than 300. You know, we're hiring with 6 agencies. We're gonna fill up an academy. Most we can get in now is about 12 at a time. That's one of those other questions about how fast can you ramp up? Not fast. And so I just would have never dreamed I couldn't find somebody to want to do this work. You know, and so it's different. And so are the people we're hiring, right? So, you know, for the longest time, we were hiring people out of trades, not a lot of them. The other one, we were hiring farmers' kids, grew up working on a farm. Those kids aren't around or entering in the workforce anymore. And so part of this is a strategic issue for us, but part of our strategic need is we got to figure out how to appeal to the ones that are around and build the work around it. That's a big challenge for us right now, but we're carrying vacancies. And that vacancy equates to somebody else got to work harder. Somebody else got to be here more than 2,912 hours. So that's a big strategic need for us as well.
One other thing that's super interesting in your last academies, we've also seen a trend. Not only do we recognize and you're seeing the stretch, but in the last multiple hiring process, the top candidates for the first time in our history have chosen other departments because they weren't so stretched. They're seeing it. They're seeing this is a department. When you come in here, someone hit it and want to be a racehorse their whole life. Some of them recognize, I don't know if that's unsustainable for 25 years.
Yeah, we do a draft day where we identify the top. It's very interesting. We identified the top candidates in a recruitment process with 5 agencies last time, or 5 agencies. We're in a room. It's like draft day. Call the top applicant. This is Mark Gaylord, Flagstaff Fire Department. I'm here with 4 other chiefs. All of us have a job offer for you. Pick which fire department you want to go to work for.
And the last 2 years, they've gone to slower organizations at great financial expense to themselves. At great financial expense to themselves. We're experiencing a lot of dynamics here. And I think, and our view is part of that stretching our folks too thin is get the right number of firefighters on duty every day.
You did mention that the public education is down, so getting to those kids that are, in that age group of even wanting to look at the fire department. I can tell you, last weekend we did Shop with a Cop. My granddaughter has been participating in that program for a while, and, Chief knows as well. This year, she got connected with a specific fireman instead of a police officer. Her first instinct was like, wait a minute, we're doing Shop with a Cop. Why am I with a fireman? And by the end of the program, she was saying, Grandma, I really like the fire department now.
Can you blame her?
That's. We already did the banter back. But this is a 9-year-old that probably really didn't know much about the fire department, and it knows a lot about the police department because Grandma works with the police department a lot.
What we need is a video game that's as fun to play as Fortnite. That's all about public safety.
I did find that there was a fire department house toy that police department didn't have. They said that because they're out in the field and the firemen are at the house, so.
That's
We had some fun with it.
That's also one of those anecdotal, when you look at the pub ed program that Kyle talked about, that hasn't been around
It
for
hasn't,
15, 16 years now, and you're looking at that age group that was never exposed
right?
to that unintentional PR. Fires never had to go out and advertise and have a PR campaign to be a firefighter. We're at that point where.
Does make a difference.
Take one more question and then we will. adjourn.
Roxana, go ahead.
Thank you. So a couple of days ago, I happened to overhear a conversation where someone was talking about how they didn't like firefighters because firefighters are always asking for overtime, and they already spend so much of their time, this is their words, just sitting around playing cards, playing on their computer, and sleeping. And that my sense of that conversation is that they saw it as a waste of public money for firefighters to be paid to do nothing most of the time. They understood that firefighters are doing life-saving things, right? But that's not the majority of the time. And yet firefighters are still requesting overtime. So I'm putting this on the table just in, a sense of having, this is the public perception, at least based on this conversation, one conversation to be clear. But in a time when people are having a hard time paying bills, they're definitely going to be looking at how public money is being spent. And in this conversation, it sounded like they felt it was being wasted. Just wanted to put that on there.
Appreciate the comment, and I think that's why it was addressed today. There is a Mayberry vision of firefighters playing checkers out in front of the firehouse. And, that may have been true at one time, but these are professionals now. They have to maintain certifications, training. Nobody's taking care of their facilities for them. And so I think what you indicate is a big outreach necessity on our part to combat that, to make sure people understand.
Yep.
The 21st century experience in the fire department is. So thank you.
Can I hit on one piece? I could spend 2 hours. Deep breath, spend 2 hours. It's one piece response. The pure financial standpoint of it, when you're talking about the numbers that were up there, 44 people per day, we do work 24-hour shifts. You can throw it out there that we get paid to sleep, and there's days, 2-hour stretches, 3-hour stretches, days you hope you get 6 hours of sleep at night. So there are times we do get paid to sleep. When you look at our schedule, we work 2,912 hours a year. The typical 40-hour week employee works 2,080 hours a year. So we're already working 800 plus hours a year more than the general 40-hour week employee. Because of Fair Labor Standards Act law that applies to us with 7K exemption, which we won't go into depth on that, we don't earn overtime the way our schedule is set up till we hit 106 hours of worked time in a 2-week period. So we work of that 800+ hours a year more than we work more than a 40-hour employee. Only about 250 hours of that is overtime. So we're working 600 hours additional 3-hour-a-week employee at straight time because of what the Fair Labor Standards Act lays out. If you want to adjust that and go to say, we're going to do 12-hour shifts because, old school, if you're leaning, you should be cleaning. We want to work you 12 hours a day, like an old plow horse. Double that amount to 88 people a day, because now you've got to double your workforce. And where did that 88 people now cost you versus going from 23 a day to 44 a day at 13.5 million? We'd love to work a 40-hour work week. We wouldn't complain a day about it. But the whole reason that firefighters are on the schedule they are is because it does save cities money. It does reduce overhead costs to municipalities. So just on a pure financial standpoint, that's a frustrating one to hear from people, because we're already working a job and a half over what a 40-hour week employee works, and 600 hours of that, the way our schedule is set up, is at straight time, not overtime. When there is additional overtime, it is there. And we got a lot of guys now that they're not seeking it out. If it's there, it's there. We're going to work it. We're going to keep the truck staffed. And there's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down with a lot of that stuff, but that's just from the financial standpoint and the staffing standpoint of why we do 24-hour shifts, 48-hour shifts, is because it does save the city money or the taxpayer money.
Another public education piece.
Yeah. And just to wrap up, just Chief Wilson points out today, we're getting ready to hire, we just had some recent attrition at Flag Fire. We have five vacancies today. And so we're working right now to participate in that process. We've got some hoops to jump through internally, make sure we can fill them all. We don't know that for sure. But we're in that spot where we hope there's enough applicants. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And 4 other fire chiefs are going. And I will tell you this, we need to put 12 people, is it 12? We need to hire 12 people for the region. I mean, we're at 47 applicants.
It's the highest we've had in 3 tests.
That is not enough. It is not enough. But anyway, that's some of the stuff we've got going on. Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Chief, thank you and the team for a concise and compelling presentation. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Okay. See you in January.
Yeah.